Welcome back to the NutriSave podcast. One of the craziest weekends in college football that we might have ever have. Probably the craziest one I've been alive for. And I hope y'all had a great weekend. Got some food with the family, all that. Some of us had good weekends because of our sports teams. Some of us had not so great weekends. And I hope that foreshadows because leading in, we have Clemson handling South Carolina this weekend, 28-14. Clemson finished 7-5 after they started, I believe it was 1-3, and almost lost to Troy. And so, good job by Dabo, especially dealing with the Klubnik injuries. And I kind of just want to hit on a couple things in that game that I saw before we lead into our resident South Carolina fan and his thoughts overall on the season and the game. And Clemson dominated the rushing battle in this game, 147-41. So they outgained them by over 100 yards. Clemson dominated third and fourth down. They were 7-17. South Carolina was 2 of 14. And the biggest thing in this game was South Carolina was -3 in turnovers. So looking at this game, South Carolina keeps, and this kind of goes for a lot of their losses this year, is they've lost a lot of the critical factors. They haven't been able to run the ball. They've turned the ball over more than the other team. I think Lenore's finished the season with like a 53% completion percentage or something to that effect. And it's looked different than it did last year. You've had a 5-win swing for South Carolina this year. They fought for Coach Beamer. I give them credit. They've fought tooth and nail to try to win some of these games, and they're just, the talent's not there like it was last year. And even I thought South Carolina was going to have a down year this year, and I didn't think it was going to be this bad at 4-8 with one SEC win, I believe. I think I was against Kentucky. Yeah. So leading into it, resident South Carolina fan Briggs McLemore.
So, for that to be my last game in Williams-Brice Stadium as a student was painful. It reminded me a lot of the 2023 football game against Clemson at home. Very low scoring, and you take away the pick six from our own 2-yard line or whatever, and game's essentially 21-14. But South Carolina didn't do shit in the second half. Again, pretty common theme for us this year throughout the entire season. And I'm really going to talk about the SEC games that we had and Clemson. I'm going to group them in as like decent teams that we played. I don't really care about the Coastal game. Don't really care about Virginia Tech, SC State, those non-cons at the start of the year. 14 points in the fourth quarter for all 9 of those games. 14 points in the fourth quarter.
If I'm not mistaken, going back to the initial point, I don't think it was great against Virginia Tech early this year either.
Yeah, I mean,
it was not great.
Vicari Swain saved us there, kind of gave us the spark with that punt return for touchdown. Given there were two Nick Harbor touchdowns that were taken off the board that I think kind of were called the wrong way, given I have a little bit of a bias, but there's a very good argument, although you're going to end up being able to say it could have gone both ways. His longer touchdown, I believe, got called back for a very questionable, I think it was a holding call. And then he had a second touchdown where it was like a toe tap in the end zone, kind of falling away thing, where it was like he had possession and then he hits the ground out of bounds, had possession still, and then kind of like loses it well after the fact. They ruled it incomplete. So you add those two in the offense, you get a little bit different stats there. But again, you talked about Lenore's having and really this offense in general having much of a down year. I expected. I'm gonna get to them in a second. I expected the defense, and this was my like. I thought the offense was gonna be great coming into the year. I thought the North was gonna take another step forward, but I thought the defense was what I was worried about. You lose guys like Kyle Kennard, Nicky Minwari.
It was balling in the NFL right now, by the
Oh my
way.
goodness, the whole Seattle secondary is just unbelievable. But I mean, a lot of our defensive line ended up going. And so I was scared at how that was going to end up being replaced. And Brian Thomas Jr. did a fantastic job this year. Dylan Stewart played good. I don't want to say great. He played pretty good. Fred Johnson, VA native, Maury High School, great season for him, especially as a young guy there too. And so the defense, I thought, played their part. They did what they could. Now the offense, you watch Lenoris this year and you watch him last year. And last year, given if you were to take a guess, the difference between the yards between the 2 years, how much do you think it would be passing yards wise?
I'd probably say over 1,000.
Now, if I was to tell you that the difference was 97 yards, would you believe me?
No, because
Actually, 103. My bad. Bad math on the fly. But it was a 103-yard passing difference between last year and this year. The big
honestly,
difference was
honestly, yeah, that makes sense. You said
the big
103
103-yard difference. He had
per game or
2,500
total?
total, total, total yards. He had 2,534 yards last year, 2,437 this year. So it was 97. I was right. But the big difference was you look at him last year, and he was just shedding tacklers. I mean, you just couldn't bring him down. I mean, it looked like the dude was covered in Diddy oil. He was just slipping and sliding everywhere. And it was highlight after highlight after highlight that he was just stacking. And so you look at him this year, and he just didn't get, I don't want to say that benefit of the doubt, but he wasn't able to pull it off. He had 674 yards last year, with his longest rush being 75 yards. This year he had 270. He also had 9 more sacks this year, which, given last year, we thought it was a lot. Our offensive line has not been the greatest. There's been a lot of turnover. There's been a lot of injuries. But there wasn't that wow factor.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but
And
there was no zone read ran this year for the most part. There was hardly any zone read ran by Carolina this year.
yeah,
In the games
and my
I really paid attention to,
my
no
my biggest
quarterback
gripe.
design runs, no
No,
creativity.
we ran the QB design runs. The thing was is we were so predictable with how we ran the ball that our run game became a non-factor. Faison, who I thought was going to be a 1,000-yard rusher coming into the season, finished with, I think, 600, well below what everyone was expecting. And so you look at last year, we had a running back who was able to just power through the middle of the line and just run through anyone. Whereas this year, you've got a guy, and I sound like a broken record saying this. I've talked with you a bunch about this, and I've talked with people here a bunch about this. Faison is not the guy who's just going to bowl over middle linebackers. He's not going to shed too many tackles from an inside defensive lineman. He's going to be someone who's going to be able to get around a corner, blow through a safety. That's just the style of runner that he is. And so trying to use him in a way that forces him to run up the middle was shoving a circular peg into a square hole. It didn't fit. And I thought it was a disservice to him. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a great back. I mean, every time we saw him kind of get to the outside, get outside the hash marks, get outside the numbers, fantastic runs with break-off big chunk plays, 15, 20-yard rushes. But when you run him up the middle, he was averaging 3 yards a carry. Maybe it was pretty much just getting to the line and then falling forward. So that was one of my points. Another big thing was in previous years, they've been very much a second half team. They've been a team that will come out a little flat footed, kind of get a feel for the game, go back in at half, and come out on fire in the second. This year, it was much the opposite. I've already mentioned the 14 points total in the fourth quarter for those 9 games where it was a real opponent. And you look at the A&M game, and the A&M game, to me, it wasn't the fact that we lost, given we were 17.5-point dogs. It was how we lost. SEC teams were 0-286 entering the A&M, entering the South Carolina A&M game when trailing by 27 points, and Texas A&M made it 1-286. But you look at our drive chart in the second half: turnover on downs, punt, 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 turnover on downs. 76 total yards in the second half. And you look at the 2 offensive touchdowns that we scored in the first half, just chunk plays. You had a 50-yard touchdown to Vandrevius Jacobs and the 75-yard touchdown, 80-yard touchdown to Harbor, where he just tracked star speed and ran away with it. And I went back because I was like, I feel like there's been a lot of those this year. There's been 7 passing touchdowns for Harbor, where it's been 50-ish. There were a couple where it was like 47 or 49 touchdown, 50-ish yard touchdown passes that went for it. But again, a lot of it all in the first half. The drives, when South Carolina tried to sustain a drive, just they'd fizzle out. You'd end up having a field goal. We had a couple of red zone field goals against A&M. But yeah, next year, I don't know if Lenoris is going to stay. We have a good QB room behind him. Aaron Nolan coming in from Ohio State. A couple of good guys that we've recruited. So it's something over this summer that I'm going to, or at least over the next month, I'm going to put thought in on whether or not I really want Lenoris to stay. I know my decision is not going to mean anything, but just how I feel about the program. And so I think this is getting to a point where it's do or die for Beamer. If he doesn't go out and succeed next year, and succeeding isn't a title. Succeeding would be at least competing for a playoff spot. Get a little bit closer than you did last season. So that's my piece on it. I'm sure you guys will hear more as I'm able to digest it and get more time removed from the heartbreak that was last Saturday. But moving on, if you want to take it away.
8 heartbreaks for this year for you. Sad to see. And we will do full season reviews for every Power 4 team in January. Stay tuned for maybe February, somewhere in there.
It'll probably bleed from January to February.
Yeah, we'll have it done before spring ball. Well, at the least. But Oklahoma escapes against LSU 17-13 in Norman. And this game, man, it feels like Oklahoma is just, they were playing with fire. It's like, it's kind of hard to describe. It's like when you put tinfoil in the microwave and like you forgot that it was tinfoil and you can't microwave it. You almost burn your house down. Or like you fall asleep when your fryer's on and you just let the water overboil. That's kind of how that game felt. It is amazing that we are 12 games into the college football season, and Oklahoma does not have an offensive identity. They had it before Mateer's injury, but they don't really have an offensive identity. They threw for over 300 yards. I get all that, but I believe Mateer had 3 interceptions. They're -2 in the turnover battle. And LSU's not capable of scoring. They really haven't been capable of scoring all year. That team kind of brought it for Alabama with Frank Wilson and then just kind of fell off a cliff. They're kind of looking towards next season. We'll get to that in a second. But it only in the last 2 games for Oklahoma, it only took a couple of catbuster plays to win the game. It was both TDs for Oklahoma were 45+ yard passes. So I really think that Oklahoma the the defense is top 5 in the nation for sure. But I don't think a good defense is going to be enough for you to win a national championship this year with how many good teams we have. Depending on how the rankings shake up, I believe Oklahoma's not guaranteed a home playoff game, but they will make the playoffs. So just something to watch out for because like I said, Oklahoma is playing with fire this weekend, and they escape a very not good LSU team.
So I want to touch on Mateer a little bit because you look at his season stats prior to the surgery before the Texas game, and you look at his season stats after then, and there is a staunch difference in passing yards. Given I've seen Mateer more as like a Drew Brees esque guy, um, not a check down king, but his balls aren't traveling that far in the air.
They can't because
And
they're going to get picked. Like,
you
it's
look
always
at
been like that because I think Materi's got a very big gunslinger mentality, but it's kind of always been like that. He's been turnover prone. The only thing, and he's finally starting to do it, he did against, I believe it was Alabama, is he's starting to run the ball. My apologies for interrupting. Go ahead.
Um, but you look at it, he's had one, two, three, four games where his longest pass has been in the 20s, right around that 20 to 25 yard range, and 7 if you bump that number up to 30. So the ball is not traveling very far downfield, and it feels to me, and I think you kind of agree on this. Oklahoma's offense, I don't want to say it's non-existent, but it seems like their whole team identity is they're waiting on the defense to generate a turnover and then get the short field and try and capitalize on it. You put Oklahoma down in their own red zone, so having to drive 80 yards. I don't know if they'll be able to do that against an Indiana, against an Ohio State. If they played Bama again, I don't know if they'd be able to do that if Bama's able to not turn the ball over.
So the way I look at this is they have an amazing defense. They force turnovers. They attack the ball. And they can rely on a couple of capbuster plays. Santanega, I think is his name. Santega, something like that. My apologies for butchering it. But his ability to generate capbuster plays is what the difference in these games, against Missouri and LSU. If I don't know if Oklahoma's one of the 12 best teams in the nation. I really don't. And that's using an eye test. I know that's using a lot of eye tests. I don't like the eye test, but it feels like they're on a train and they can't get it to stop, and eventually they're gonna hit something. And it's probably gonna be in a playoff game. But say they play it might who's their theoretical first round matchup right now? Hold on. It looks like they play the
Notre Dame?
Notre Dame. Yeah, I don't know, man. And that depends what happens this weekend. Like I just I don't know if they're gonna be able to compete with if they cannot get turnovers against an elite team. they will not win any games, or they will not win a playoff game. And Venables made it to the playoffs. There were people calling for his head last year. Give them credit; they're finding a way in every game. They were down 4 points, I believe, or 3 points in the final 5 minutes of that game. So they've been able to escape these games, and they've dominated on the defensive side of the ball. But offensively, I don't think there's an identity. They have a team identity, but not an offensive identity. Anything else on
And
that?
I think one of the big things that you look at is a lot of the common factors between all the teams ahead of them, or like the teams that they match up with, are teams that don't really turn the ball over a lot and have very, very good defenses.
But
So,
Alabama does not turn the ball over a lot. I believe they're top 20 in giveaways, and they turn the ball over 3 times.
and that's something that I think has been happening more as of late. You saw Simpson's 2 picks against East Illinois. I think they put the ball on the ground a couple times that game. So I don't think they necessarily lost the turnovers, but I think there were a couple fumbles that were rolling around there. Yeah, that's all I had for Oklahoma.
So, like I said about LSU, kind of more looking into the next season, especially with the Brian Kelly, kind of lost some gas after the Alabama game. The biggest headline of the weekend, in my opinion, LSU hires Lane Kiffin in a drama-filled saga. First and foremost, Marty Smith. Thank the Lord that hostage situation is over. Marty Smith somehow made it out. I think he was there from Friday all the way until Sunday night. And if you haven't checked it out, go check out the Pat McAfee interview with Marty Smith. He kind of explains the scenario of those couple of days. I'd highly recommend you check that out if you haven't already. And we'll kind of just have a conversation about this because one, I think this was handled badly on all sides. First, we will get to part of the problem with this, which is the college football calendar. I know Saban's touched on this and a bunch of other people that are really tapped in and have lived and breathed the sport for a lot longer than most people. So we'll touch on that in another time, probably next week or the week after. But it was handled badly on all sides to me. Between Keith Carter, I believe is the athletic director, Kiffin, especially in the days leading up to it, and LSU. I don't poaching coaches in the middle of the season. I get you got to do what you got to do, but it was kind of a disaster. LSU kind of handled everything badly when it came to Brian Kelly, and then now this situation. So I think there's a lot of wrong done on all sides. Coming from that, I think there's a lot of things that happened that Lane wishes he had back. And you saw his interview on the tarmac with Marty Smith. You saw him putting the jersey up for LSU. It he looks completely dejected. He looks completely heartbroken at the way things went down. I think Kiffin is telling the truth when he says his heart was on Ole Miss, but his mentors Saban and Carroll told him to go to LSU. You don't know when a top 5 coaching job is going to come open again. And so you think about it, DeBoer's probably not leaving Alabama anytime soon. Day's not leaving Ohio State. Kirby's not leaving Georgia. Uh, Moore may go away from the Wolverines. There, whatever other jobs you want to submit in that upper tier, I can't think of any other off the top of my head. Excuse me. And so I can't blame the guy. And I saw the videos. We both saw the videos. I'm sure you've seen the videos of the fans at the airport throwing middle fingers and all that type of stuff. And I don't know if Ole Miss fans are always going to feel that way. So I'm sure some of them will forgive and forget, and it might be that way forever. I don't think he's going to be in a very warm welcome in Oxford when he goes there next year. but it's just kind of heartbreaking. I loved Lane at Ole Miss, and I just I don't think that's the way anyone wanted it to go down. And this situation kind of sucks. The way the calendar is, and we will get into that conversation, but trying to leave that part out of it, even though it's a big part, we'll talk about that later when there's not so much football going on. But it's just kind of a heartbreaking situation for Lane because I feel like he really did want to stay at Ole Miss.
So I understand all sides to this argument here. And you look at like one of the big things, I guess, or the big gripe that a lot of people have, not even just Ole Miss fans, but college football fans in general, with Lane leading a team that they're historically the best season Ole Miss has ever had. Their first 11 win regular season, squarely into the playoff. For now, shit could hit the fan. Kind
Which
of
we will
rooting for
talk
some
about later.
pandemonium.
Which
Um,
we'll talk about later.
But I think for him, I think he truly wanted to be able to coach the rest of the season. And what I don't understand is why if Ole Miss's AD and the administration there were so against him coming back to coach during the playoffs, and that I feel like that truly is their best chance at winning. I don't think they have a shot at winning the title. I think that's too far of a reach for this team. But I think they'd be able to go win a game or two and make it into the games that really, truly matter.
Make it to a New Year's Six Bowl at the very least.
Yeah. And so, and then you have Charlie Weiss, the OC, coming back to coach. And I guess, I don't know if their big worry was Kiffin poaching players, because I know you and I have both talked about, well, if Weiss is going back, he's got the chance to do it.
So,
Hey, why don't you come play for us in Baton Rouge? Like, I don't get why, if you're bringing one back, why not bring both back? Or have neither one of them come back and just kind of take you with what you have in building.
I forgot to hit this. Like, the notion of Kiffin coaching, and I've seen a lot of Ole Miss fans saying that they didn't want Kiffin to coach in the playoffs since he's leaving. That notion was never going to happen. And you got to do what you got to do if you're Keith Carter. Leaving Charlie Weiss out of it, that news broke today, Tuesday, December 12th, or 2nd, sorry. So, and I don't understand that. I don't believe that out of it. Kiffin was never going to coach in the playoffs. In that high of a job, it's not like Tulane where they're letting Summerall coach in the playoffs. It's not one of those things. This is a very big program, and Ole Miss has, say Ohio State's not as good as everyone thinks they are. Ole Miss has a chance to win the national championship, and they're going to a playoff. They're going to have a home playoff game. They might be favored if Kiffin was there. But that notion was never going to happen. I think that allowing Weiss to coach I don't understand that. I really don't. Pete Golding, they finished this coaching search in 4 hours, and I think Pete Golding is a tremendous football coach, but he has never been a head coach anywhere. So he's been a defensive coordinator for a long time, but I don't situationally it's going to be very bad for Ole Miss in the playoffs. Every time you have an interim head coach, and I know Pete Golding was named the official head coach, whatever. Anytime you have a first-time head coach in general, situationally it's really bad. Jerome Moore struggled with this in his first 2 games. Ryan Day struggled with this when he first got hurt. Kirby struggled with this. All these guys that were first-time head coaches struggled with and Pete Golding's first time head coaching a football game will be in the playoffs. in that atmosphere against a top 10 team in the country. They might end up getting a lucky draw with Virginia, but that's it. And so it's a I don't understand it. I get why Ole Miss said no. And from everything I've read, the last couple of days were more Kiffin thinking he's going to take the job and then trying to convince them to let him coach in the playoffs, which I understand. I think he genuinely loves Ole Miss, but you might never have that opportunity again. And a couple other notes. When they left the meeting, I believe it was only Keith Carter talking to them in that meeting that was supposed to happen Sunday morning, and then it didn't happen until Sunday afternoon. Reportedly from Marty Smith is a player screamed after that meeting, it's Pete Golding era, which is interesting. Not saying anything, don't know, but it is interesting. I think the players do love Pete Golding. We'll see about Ole Miss, and I hope they go win it all. If the committee doesn't screw them over like they did Florida State, it's another topic for later in the episode. But if I hope Ole Miss goes on a run, I really do, because I'd love to see this team ball out. Even though their head coach decided to leave, wasn't completely his fault, but their head coach decided to leave in the greatest season in 132 or 133 years of Ole Miss football. You got anything else on Golding? Anything?
I will say something. I've heard a lot of people talking about this possibly being a Marcus Freeman effect. Yeah, I mean, you saw how the players reacted with the leaked audio. I don't know if you've heard that yet from Ole Miss player in that players only meeting with Keith Carter, um, and then seeing the video of Marcus Freeman being announced as the Notre Dame head coach to the players themselves in the weight room up in South Bend. I think it's a very similar reaction, given the circumstances could not be further from anything remotely similar, other than the head coach leaving for LSU.
So,
So, go ahead.
so I don't know if Lane's outwardly as bad of a guy as Brian Kelly, quote unquote. I mean, you see the stuff come out about against Brian Kelly, and Notre Dame fans were complaining about this for years. And I don't know if Kiffin was necessarily a bad guy to the players. I think he cared about the players, and he kind of got screwed over by what college football is now, and it kind of just the cookie kind of crumbled that way, and it's kind of unfortunate. But anything else?
Nope.
All right. Still in the SEC, Georgia wins a defensive struggle against Georgia Tech, 16-9 in clean old-fashioned hate. And I don't have a lot on this game, and there are a lot of questions for Georgia considering this is one of the worst defenses they probably played all year, and their offense looked putrid. Gunnar Stockton didn't look like his Heisman push form like he did against Texas. But I will say the Georgia Tech defense did show up. They played arguably their best game they did all year. It was really impressive. And third down is kind of what decided this game. Georgia was 6 of 14. Georgia Tech was 4 of 11. And early in that game, we saw Haynes King throw the interception. I was like, oh boy, this might get ugly. And it ended up not. Georgia Tech hung around in that game. They kept fighting. And Georgia's defense showed out. And Georgia is not a team I want to play right now. Even though the performance was not aesthetically pleasing, they didn't look great. But I still think the Dogs are primed for a great spot. They're favored going into the SEC championship game, which we'll talk about later. But just a lot of questions kind of popped up from this performance when we kind of thought we knew who Georgia was.
Yeah, I got the chance to listen to this on my drive back down, and This is more of what I envision Big Ten football being, just a defensive slugfest. Um, and I think Georgia Tech defensively did what they had to do to win. But I think offensively, I just don't think that when you look at the matchups, you go position by position, they got, I don't want to say out athleted, but I mean Georgia just has the better players. I think that's what it came down to because both teams played, I don't want to say great games, but they both teams did what they needed to do in a lot of the areas of the game, and the margin of victory was so slim. I mean, you look at the difference on third downs, the percentages are pretty much very similar. Just Georgia had the ball longer, 11 more minutes possession time, and so that turnover. I mean, Georgia had one too. So again, I think what it really came down to was there's just like more dogs in Athens.
Well, and like I thought that for Georgia Tech to even have a chance in this game, they were going to need a Haynes King um legacy game. And they didn't need it. And it was incredibly impressive. And there are a couple things Haynes missed. I think Haynes might be playing a little beat up, which he gets beat up all year anyway. Like he took a beating last year in this game. And it was much closer than the Dogs would have wanted. And this game continues to end up close. I think the last 3 years it's been a one score or at least a less than 10 point game, I believe. Anything else on Georgia? So moving on, Oregon secures a first round home game, beating Washington 26-14. Oregon's defense showed out once again, and I said last week that I had a hard time finding what Washington does really well, and they didn't do anything well against Oregon. Specifically, the offense didn't really do anything well last week, and specifically the pass defense, nothing could get going on the pass on Washington's pass offense. Drop balls. Damon Williams kind of looked confused. It looked like the game was moving a little too fast for him, and so Washington still had a good year. It's a tough place to play. It was a great win for Oregon. Dante Moore is playing his best ball. He's done it away from home for a couple times now, and I've really questioned Dante Moore because it wasn't great. He wasn't really showing out like Fernando Mendoza, and Julian Sayin. And so he is just threading the needle again with backup receivers. Hey, Oregon is so beat up. They might be the most beat up playoff team in the country right now. And they're still just stringing drives together. I mean, they look great. And Washington's probably a top 35, 30 team. Give okay, 30's top 30 is a little generous. Probably a top 35, top 40 team. And so that's a tough place to play. It's one of the hardest places to play in the country. I'd probably put it top 15. And it's a really good win for Oregon to finish out the year. They get out of that really tough stretch of their schedule at the end without a loss. They're only lost to Indiana. And I think Oregon is really primed for a playoff spot. And they have 3 weeks until their next game. And they look to get healthy. And they win again in the turnover margin. Ugh. Washington was -2 turnovers. I will sway it to you.
I think Dante Moore's starting to hit his stride fully at the right time. He had a couple of games where he didn't break like 130 yards. I think it was like a 3 game stretch. Given weather had a big impact on that, and that's something that you see very often in the Big Ten. Can't really do anything about that. Mother Nature's going to Mother Nature. Uh, but I mean, you're starting to see him come back and come out and just absolutely tear up defenses. And he threw for like 90% completion percentage against Minnesota, uh, threw for 280 against Washington in Washington, again, with beat up receivers. So I think that if they use these 3 weeks to kind of get right and get their starters back, he's going to be on a roll. They'll be getting work back into the system. I think Oregon will be a tough team to play. They're going to be hosting a playoff game. So I think it'll be very interesting to see who goes there and ultimately, like this next weekend with conference championships, whether like if Georgia loses, is Georgia going to go to Oregon? Because I think that would be one hell of a matchup.
Well, we all know Eugene's a tough place to play, and the Big Ten. No, I'm probably going to catch some heat for saying this. We're going to clip it anyway. The Big Ten might have the three of the four best teams in the country. I think, with the exception of Georgia being in that top four. I think a lot of teams learned a lot from what Ohio State did last year and is peaking in the right time in mid-December. I think a lot of teams, I think Dan Lanning and Oregon peaked too early last year, and they just got a splattering put against them against Ohio State in the first round. And you look at these three Big Ten teams, and I'm telling you, I know a lot of people haven't watched an Oregon game since the Indiana game. I'm telling you, this Oregon team, I don't want to play them right now. As Buckeye fan, I do not want to play them. I am very I think a lot of these teams are figuring out how to peak at the right time. And for Washington, real quick, I hope Jed Fish doesn't leave because they're a lot better than they were last year. And I think Damon Williams with another year can do really good things. And just see I think college football is better when Washington's good, especially because Seattle is a beautiful place to play. So, anything else on that? All right. Speaking of a team that Oregon has beaten this year, Penn State. So, a lot of news has come out after we had kind of made this. Penn State still doesn't have a coach. National Signing Day will already be over by the time this is released. It is on December 3rd. We were recording this, and that is December 2nd. They still don't have a coach as of 10:52 Mountain Time at night on December 2nd, which means they're probably not getting a coach. Kalani Sitake was the top target. I believe that came out yesterday, and today he announced that he was getting a big extension from BYU to stay. And it was Bob Chesney. Now he was hired at UCLA, and now it's Sitake. Then they won't have a coach. And here's my thing, is they fired James Franklin so early in the season. I believe it was, week 6? Week 6 or 7? They fired their coach. They fired their coach so early in the season to get a head start on the coaching search, just so they'd already have quite a few candidates interviewed by this point. And now, you are still... Arkansas somehow hired a coach before you. Ole Miss conducted a coaching search in 4 hours. Michigan State conducted a coaching search within a couple of hours. They fired Jonathan Smith and hired Pat Fitzgerald right after that. And you're still looking for a coach? You're chasing ghosts right now. You are chasing ghosts. And you better hope that someone... I know I saw a post where someone posted that a private flight was leaving from Columbus to Happy Valley State College. I don't know if Hardline's leaving. He hasn't left for quite a while. If he does, good for him. As long as he doesn't leave during the playoff run. But even then, I don't think Brian Hartline's ready for a job, but nothing has been confirmed, so I'm not going to touch on that too much. But you thought you were so much smarter than everyone else. You have the 126th or 130th or 132nd something recruiting class. And you are behind Harvard in recruiting rankings right now. You are behind Harvard. You are right above Air Force in recruiting rankings. You have four You have 4 4-stars and 1 3-star. That is all you have in your class. And James Franklin's poached most of them. And so I don't know why. This is what happens when you have not football people trying to make decisions that football people should be making. And I'm not here to question Pat Kraft's qualification, if he's qualified for the job, but this coaching search has been a disaster. And there was maybe the thought of Pat Kraft had that secret candidate, and it was never, and he was going to outfool everyone, but he didn't. He didn't. You still don't have a coach. You're going to end up with a terrible recruiting class. And it's all because you wanted to act over emotion because James Franklin had a dead team this year because they made their full identity on national championship or bust. And that's what you get, because this is not going to be the first time that a head coach with a team that's supposed to be national championship or bust just has a dead team. It was kind of like that for Clemson this year, and injuries didn't really help that. And I think Dabo just refusal to supplement in the transfer portal is another thing. But I just don't know what they're doing, and I hope they fail because they shouldn't have fired James Franklin. You and I talked. I was very angry over this, but you're just stupid. You're genuinely stupid, and you just screwed your playoff your program for more than the next 5 years.
So I know when we were talking that we originally thought this was going to set the program back 5 years. And now the fact that they still don't have a head coach, this screamed to me the same exact situation the New York Knicks faced when they fired after last given I think they'd gone there 2 years in a row and still couldn't get past them. Completely different scenarios because then like those guys can't just up and leave. Whereas you got the transfer portal and guys are obviously going to be bailing on Penn State. I mean this program's in a tailspin right now and the controls are locked. The boat's sinking and there's no captain. And so there's no end in sight for the pain for Penn State. And the fact that they fired their coach so early, drugged their feet for so long, and now you are seeing all of these, I don't want to call them secondary programs, but lower level programs like Arkansas be able to go out and get a coach. Auburn was able to get a coach. I don't know if they're necessarily secondary, but everyone else who's started their coaching search months after you has finished. There's no one left on the table. Like, genuinely, who else are you going to be able to go after?
Kentucky
Stupid.
got Will Stein, who I think is a great hire. Kentucky got Will Stein.
I mean, they might end up with Mark Stoops.
Gonna end up with
Or
Brian Kelly.
Billy Napier.
Honestly,
Billy might be the best.
Billy might work out there. I know Florida fans wouldn't like that, but yeah, they think Billy's the devil. But if he is given the right resources to succeed, I think Billy might be able to succeed. Depends on the staff, but they might have to hire Terry Smith. They've screwed themselves. You have screwed yourself because you thought you were smarter than everyone else, except your message board. You listened to the message board too much. You listened to the Instagram comment sections too much. You listened to Twitter too much, and now you're in this situation because you fired 104 and 45 coach. Mind you, he made Vandy good before anyone else did. He had success at Vanderbilt before NIL. No one has ever done that. I think he took Vanderbilt 8-4. At the very least, I know they went 6-6. So, and now James Franklin is likely going to win an ACC championship within the next 3 years at Virginia Tech. Maybe that's a little lofty. He's going to win an ACC championship at Virginia Tech at some point. And you fired him without cause. That's the problem. You fired him for football-related reasons, and now you have screwed yourself. So good luck. Good luck. And now all those Virginia recruits you were getting Penn State, yeah, they're gone. They're gone. James Franklin's going to go recruit Virginia. Virginia is a talent-rich state, and all of them are gone. So good luck. I hope you don't succeed. And you're going to get blown out by Ohio State, Oregon, potentially the Wolverines, Indiana, every year. And you're probably going to be, 4-8 next year at best? Because all those great players you have this year, if they're draft eligible, they're gone. They're gone to the NFL. And half of them will probably transfer to Virginia Tech.
I was going to say, if they're not draft eligible, they're probably hitting the portal.
So good luck. I wish it couldn't happen to a better program. And it couldn't happen to a better fan base. Because you thought firing 104-45 coach was a great move. Because you thought you were smarter than everyone. Anything else on that?
Nope.
All right. Anyways, Alabama wins the Iron Bowl 27-20, secures an SEC championship game bid despite a comeback effort from Auburn. And my first thought of this game is it played exactly like the Oklahoma-Alabama game, except Bama was on the right side of it. Auburn outgained Alabama 411 to 280, but Bama was +2 in turnovers. It wasn't pretty. It was very unaesthetically pleasing. It feels like Bama's starting to run out of gas. And another thought I had watching this game was Auburn's game plan starting the game was so questionable. You saw the performance Ashton Daniels put up against Vandy, and there were no quarterback design runs. There were none of them. I don't understand. And it was just a pitiful effort from Auburn. Dropped passes. They put the ball on the ground 4-5 times. Costly penalties at the wrong time. I think a penalty took off a touchdown. And if you were to tell me that game was 17-0, like watching that game, the game was 17-0, I thought this was going to get ugly. I thought it was going to be 34-3 or something like that. And credit for DJ Durkin for rallying the boys and getting them to come back. But just way too many mistakes. And it kind of sums up Auburn's season this season on offense. So congrats to Bama, but I am very worried for them because their pass game is not as precise as it was early in the season, which is why they're able to win that string of games. And it's kind of paperclipped and taped together right now. They got Elmer's glue, the little purple one, gluing everything together, trying to hope they can make it to the playoffs and the SEC championship.
Which I know we'll talk about the SEC championship tomorrow, but I think we're seeing a situation of Oregon last year playing out for Alabama in real time, where they went through that gauntlet of a schedule, peaked during then, and I mean it's a paper machete football team that's trying to hang on right now. I mean, they're barely scraping by. They blew a 17-point lead. And I thought, watching that game, I thought the Jordan Hare voodoo magic was working. I thought they were going to pull it off, and it was the critical turnover at the end that cost Auburn and ended up losing them the game.
I agree. Speaking of Auburn, Alex Golesh gets hired at Auburn. And Alex Golesh was one of the top coaches in the coaching cycle. USF has their first 9-win season since 2017 under him. And a lot of the rumors were that Auburn almost had Summerall and then kind of screwed it up. So they ended up with Golesh, which works out for them. Sucks for Arkansas. He was 23-15 at USF, second best win percentage of any head coach. And you know how offense has been the problem at Auburn for quite a few years. Alex Golesh was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee in 2021 and 2022. Led points per game in 2022. Who was their quarterback, you ask? Hendon Hooker. And you saw the way Hendon Hooker developed over those couple of years he was a starter. And I don't think quarterback's going to be a problem for Auburn anymore. And I can only speak to so much because I don't know the guy. But from the outside kind of looking in, I think it's a good hire. And if Auburn gives him the right resources and he has the right people around him, staff included, he might get Auburn back on track. And from everything I've read and seen, this is probably the best coaching search Auburn's ran in a long time.
So I think the implications of Lane going to LSU had a massive trickle down effect.
Oh,
I
100%.
think when you look at it when it's all said and done, because Florida was also in the bidding for Lane, that once they found out, hey, there's not as much of a mutual interest, we're probably not going to land him. That's when they shifted their focus. Their number 2 guy, who was Summerall, who was Auburn's number 1 guy, and so we saw everything kind of everyone had to kind of shift down the ladder a little bit. But I think it's a fantastic hire for Auburn, getting Golesh. Seeing what he's done with a USF team that prior to his tenure struggled, wasn't the greatest in the American. And so seeing him be able to get a shot at a premier program, fantastic. Question is, will he be able to bring that Jordan Hare voodoo magic back to Jordan Hare and bring the Iron Bowl back to the Plains?
I agree. This was Miami dominates Pitt in the cold weather 38-7. Cold weather was a huge talking point in this game, and Miami was the tougher team. You saw the quote on the screen of Miami head coach Mario Cristobal saying there's no such thing as bad weather, there's only weak people, or something to that effect. Well, they were not weak in this game. Miami dominated the rushing battle 140-30. They won the first down 28-11. And I said last week that Carson Beck was going to be able to tear up this defense, or he had the opportunity to, and he did. And since the losses, Miami has done really, honestly, played their best ball. They're peaking, and it might not be enough considering you had lost to 2 unranked teams, and Louisville was ranked, and then they kept losing. But and for Pitt, it was a bad effort, beating almost every critical category. And it's the second time against a really good team that Pitt has fallen apart. And maybe Notre Dame being a must-win game would have helped. So, okay, Narduzzi. But back to Miami. Miami's playing tremendous right now. And unfortunately, it might not be enough for them. They need a lot of help going into this weekend, which we'll talk about later. And yeah, there's not much to say. It was just an impressive just domination of everything possible in that game.
I think Miami's biggest problem is going to be it's too little too late. The 2 losses, I mean, they're really bad losses. The loss to SMU, and then you get the other loss to Louisville, who both teams are having a down year compared to last year, especially SMU, who was in the playoff last year. But you look at it, I mean, their last 4 games being NC State, I think Boston College, Pitt, and
Virginia Tech.
Those aren't necessary. Oh, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. I don't know who I said before, but those aren't for teams that are necessarily good. Pitt better than most, but we've seen them have their up days and their down days. We saw who was it, Notre Dame just flat out just break them. Um, and so you look at it, Notre Dame, when it comes to the playoffs, and we'll talk a lot about this more tomorrow when we go deep dive into this, but Notre Dame's losses being to two top 10 teams when they played, being compared to the head to head for Miami and the A&M game, and then Miami losing to both those. It's If I'm a committee member, I think it's hard to put Miami in over Notre Dame. Yes, the head to head means a lot, but I don't know how you can put a team in with the two losses like that, and then after those two losses, play kind of a cakewalk of a schedule and just kind of be able to sleepwalk into the playoff.
I can agree. Um, I think Miami should be ranked ahead of Notre Dame, but that is a conversation for later. Anything else on Miami Pitt specifically?
No, and we'll have our final top 25 rankings coming out prior to the start of the championship games on Friday.
All right. Speaking of domination, Florida dominated Florida State in Gainesville this weekend. Good bounce back for them, but Florida fans were really happy about that, but not so much about who they hired. John Summerall goes to Florida, and anytime you kind of go from a guy of the stature of Lane Kiffin to John Summerall, he's not as flashy of a name, you know. And the instant reaction was, "Oh, he's a G6 coach from Indiana, or not Indiana, Louisiana." And yeah, but John Summerall was up for literally every job. He would have gone to LSU, probably. He probably was second in line for LSU if Lane didn't go there, if he chose to stay at Ole Miss. So Summerall was 42-11. He won Sun Belt both years he was at Troy. The couple times Troy was good. Tulane's in a playoff spot as of right now. We'll see what happens this weekend. And I think the biggest thing to take away from this is I don't think a lot of the other coaches at Florida were put in a good position to succeed. Billy specifically, and I think Billy left Florida a lot better than he found it. And I think Summerall is in a much better position to succeed than his predecessors. So I think it's a great hire. He's looked at in coaching circles as the next coaching superstar. So good on Florida for making this effort or making this hire, and great hire. Don't know if it's gonna work out.
A lot of high expectations, and it's a very high pressure environment in Gainesville. But I think it's going to be very much a diamond in the rough. He's kind of like Signetti. He's kind of won wherever he's been. You've seen Tulane be pretty dominant the last 2 years. Troy was in the Sun Belt championship 2 years, so he's accustomed to winning. And while I think that there will be some growing pains for sure next year, I don't think it'll be sustained. I think it's going to be he's going to get in the SEC. He's going to figure everything out this first year. He's going to kind of get his feet wet, and then uh, next year, so 2027, he'll be fully in, and I think Florida will be competing at the top for an SEC title.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's looked at as the next great head coach, and like you said, he's won, and he's a defensive guy. You've heard a lot of good things about him. Go go look him up. I think you'll be surprised with what he's done as his resume.
I will put a I don't want to say caveat, but I will kind of put a thing on this. I think into that 2027 season, Florida will be to the SEC title as Ole Miss is to the national championship this year without the Lane Kiffin drama. Like, I don't think they'll win it, but they'll certainly be a name that's in the circle.
For sure. They'll probably be in the bubble for a playoff spot at the very least. Vanderbilt. Speaking of bubble, Vanderbilt wins in a second half splattering at Tennessee in Knoxville 45-24. And this game was tied going into halftime. And Vanderbilt just dominated. They outscored Tennessee 24-3, 579 yards. That's not combined. That's just Vanderbilt. And just a complete splattering. And they have been really putting the pedal to the metal to push for this playoff spot. Clark Lee got re-signed. It's a great time to be a Vanderbilt fan. Pavia for Heisman's still alive. He's doing the tour of some of the podcasts. And I don't think it's going to be enough for Vandy. I think the logo kind of just it's another snide at them, even though I just don't think there's enough room in general, whether it's a Vanderbilt logo or not. And I just don't think it's going to be enough. And Pavia for Heisman is still alive. And so give them all the credit.
So I know for sure you're going to hear me say this tomorrow, but the best way to solidify your spot in the playoff is to win your games. That loss to Texas, where you go down, I think it was 3 scores in the first half, and it looked like it was going to be an absolute thumping. You don't go down by that much, that second half comeback solidifies your spot. An 11-1 Vanderbilt in the playoff. I mean, that would have been insane storyline. Pulling off a comeback like that, Pavia would be number 1 vote for Heisman. His numbers this year are pretty good. I think everyone's numbers are a little bit down compared to what you usually see for a Heisman quarterback, throwing for about 4,000 yards. Given there's still, for some of them, 2 to 3 games left to play minimum. So, my little piece on it. They've been on an absolute tear lately. Thumped. I guess they didn't thump Auburn, but got in a shootout with Auburn, won it by a touchdown, thumped Kentucky, beat Missouri, beat LSU. But that loss to Texas, I think that's going to be what keeps them out. I don't think Texas is going to make it either. I don't think they're going to be, if there is a 3-loss team that gets in, it's going to be Alabama after losing the SEC title game. It's not going to be Texas. So we'll dive deeper into that tomorrow. But
speaking of Texas, I had just completely forgot. I forgot to put Texas A&M in here. So we're going to do this on the fly. Completely forgot about this game. It's a reaction to looking at the stats. And I think A&M kind of dominated that game in the first half. It kind of played out the exact way A&M wanted. But Texas just got on a roll, man. They got on a roll of running the ball with Wisner. Wisner had 19 carries, 155 yards. And the longest of 48. Arch had a 35-yard rush. And so these big plays kind of catapulted Texas. And we had said, I had said it before, Texas A&M's gettable. It's going to be the turnovers. Well, 2 fourth-quarter turnovers by Marcel Reed, I believe. Try to check it. Yeah, last 2 drives for A&M were interceptions. So it was the turnovers. They outrushed them. Marcel Reed was Texas A&M's leading rusher. No touchdowns for Marcel Reed. And it was one of those type of things. And that's all I really got on that. And on the Texas playoff, it's not going to be enough. Like the Florida loss is going to get thrown in your face. And there's never been a team that has less than 10 wins in the playoffs. It's not going to start this year. It's more crowded than it was last year. You have 10-win teams missing the playoff this year. You didn't have one last year. You're not going to make the playoffs with less than 10 wins. I'm sorry.
I think I think the big takeaway, and I think Texas should look at this season as a massive success. I know there's going to be a little bit of letdown and a little bit of pain from missing the playoff. I know that was your ultimate goal, but to see the development of Arch Manning this year and to see the struggles he had early on, see how uncomfortable he was, to now seeing him how he was just on tear. Given I thought he would have thrown for more against a Texas A&M secondary that isn't the greatest. He only had 179 yards, but
He
I've
tacked
loved
on
to see,
53 rushing as well.
mhm. But I've loved to see his progression throughout the year. I think he's going to be an absolute stud next year. And looking at that, and that should be a big takeaway because at the start of the year there was a lot of question on is he really that good? Is this just name hype, if you want to call it that? Just hype over being a part of that Manning legacy. And I think the second half of the year, when it really mattered, he's turned it on and kind of under the radar. I mean, he's got stats similar to Mendoza. Um, I don't think Arch should be in the talk for Heisman at all. I think the first half of the season really kind of killed it for him. But fantastic progression, fantastic development. Kudos to the staff at Texas for helping him out there and getting him into a spot where he's comfortable. I think that's the biggest thing that you see for quarterbacks, both in the NFL and in college, is they aren't going to do well when they aren't comfortable. That's one of the reasons I don't think you've seen Lenore Sellers excel this year was he wasn't comfortable behind an O line that was very subpar. So that's all I've got for that.
I think Texas's O line played the best game they had all year, and that was why Wisner was able to run for 150 something yards. All right, Ohio State breaks the 2,191 day streak against the team up north, 27-9. I will let you take this one first, and then I will go on my rant.
I don't want to steal your thunder, but I to all the Ohio State fans complaining, oh, the refs are not Ohio State fans, Michigan fans complaining, oh, the refs screwed us, bad call here, bad call there. Jeremiah Smith's touchdown should have been taken off the board. You can't complain when you don't score a touchdown. I know you agree with this, and you can't say, oh, Ohio State sympathizer, oh, Big Ten sympathizer. I have shit on Ohio State more than anything. I'm up there with I don't want to say up there. I dislike Ohio State. I find it extremely funny when they lose, and I'm the first person Joey hears from when they do. But you can't sit here and talk all this crap and bring up all these excuses when Bryce Underwood throws for 63 yards.
$12 million quarterback, by the way.
You almost got you got doubled up, almost tripled up on offensive yards. That's just abysmal. I know weather played. Actually, weather didn't really play a factor. That's just a little bit of flurries. But
The biggest way weather played a part is Brutus was able to cross out the M and then write script
that's
Ohio.
fucking hysterical.
Brutus won more than Ohio State this weekend. That was awesome. I know. I saw Team Up North fans complaining about it, saying this is as bad as flag planting. One, flag planting's stupid. Like it's more disrespectful than that. And you deserved it. You got dominated. And after everything you did, and actually, not gonna say it. Not gonna say it. Anyways, back to the actual analysis of the game, because I try to be unbiased on the show. The stat that I had mentioned earlier in the last week is the rushing battle. It's the team that's won the rushing battle has won every game since 2001. Ohio State won the rushing battle 186-100. Got really bad in the second half. Second half rush yards were 110 to -8. I mean, OSU on third and fourth down, 12 of 20. Team up north, 1 of 10. Ohio State Total yards, 419. Wolverines, 163. And the second half performance by Ohio State was just clinical. And Ryan Day's a better man than me. I would have ran the score up. He just played clock management. Ohio State had more plays on one drive in the second half than the team up north did the entire half. They had 16 plays in the second half. Ohio State had 20 on that one drive. 11 minutes and 56 seconds time of possession. And this game, and for two things for Ohio State's team this season, Julian Sayin finished the regular season with the completion percentage record at 78.9%, I believe. Ohio State is the first team to hold all of its first 12 opponents under 17 points since Florida in 1975. And everyone's going to remember this game as a beatdown, a blowout. But remember what you were thinking in the first quarter. If you were watching that game, remember what you were thinking in the first quarter. The Wolverines just drove down the field. They had just ran the ball down Ohio State's throat and kicked a field goal. Ohio State gets the ball because they deferred to the second half. The second pass of the game, Julian Sayin throws a terrible interception, just completely misreads it. Great play by the DB and undercuts it. And they got the ball in plus territory. I believe it's at the Ohio State 35 or something. They go up 6-0. Kick a field goal. And that was the largest deficit Ohio State's faced all season. And Julian Sayin comes back out there, cool, calm, collected. They have looked like they've been there before. There was no stress, visible stress on the bench. And so you look at it, this team, you would think the way they performed in that game after being down in a tight game, the 4-game losing streak, all the things that have been said about Ryan Day, having the 24-hour security, all that type of stuff. And they look cool, calm, collected, and they played incredibly well despite facing a scenario that they've never been before in the snow in Ann Arbor, which is one of the toughest places to play in the country. And I think they haven't been tested this much this year, and it looks like they had been there before. I think that is one of the most impressive parts of this team, and you're going to see more of it when they go and play Indiana. They did impress, and I don't know how many people. One more point I want to hit is I don't know how many people saw the clip of Ryan Day giving Patricia a hug and Patricia screaming, "I told you, I told you." Matt Patricia, remember what you thought. And you and I had this conversation when Ohio State hired Patricia. Remember what you thought when Ohio State hired Matt Patricia, and you're like, Matt Patricia, the guy that got fired at Detroit? That guy? That's a bad hire. Ohio State's defense, they're going to go 9-3 this year. Remember that. Historic defense this year. Historic defense. And everyone that was calling that a bad hire now, it's almost like you're embarrassed to claim that now. It's kind of an embarrassing take. But just remember that. And I will make this statement on the Wolverines. Stop talking about firing Sharon Moore. I know his claim to fame was he was on the staff for that game during the streak. Got to give him some time. The last 2 years have been kind of rebuild years. They had a better season this year. Where do they just got to retool and just keep improving. It'll get better, or it won't. I couldn't care less.
I didn't really watch that game. I didn't watch that game at all. I've seen clips and highlights of it. I was at the Clemson game myself, suffering. I didn't realize that the Ohio State offense turned into a service academy there. An 11-minute, 56-second drive.
Turns out never giving the ball to the other team ever again is a pretty solid strategy to win a game.
And speaking of, I don't know if you watched the Navy-Memphis game. Navy had a drive in the entire second half. I think the time of possession was like 25-5
That is
or something.
ridiculous.
It was stupid. Navy had like a 12 or 13-minute drive to start off. Like Memphis got the ball in the third quarter with like 2 minutes left in the third.
I think Ohio State took the ball with like 3 minutes left in the third and didn't give it back to the Wolverines until like halfway through the fourth, in which I think the Wolverines only ran like 7 more plays after that. So it was impressive. And Joel Klatt put this on the broadcast really well. And he said every time you watch Ohio State play, they keep answering more and more questions. Whereas Georgia, Alabama, these other teams, you watch them play in Texas A&M. You watch them this weekend, and you're like, huh? How, this is not who we thought you were. This isn't who we thought you were. So I think you articulated it really well. I think Ohio State will answer. Hopefully, they'll answer the rest of the questions until the goalposts move again. But that happens to every team. Not playing victim status here, but yeah, I think that was a pretty good part one.
We will see you guys back here tomorrow for part 2 of our 3-hour segment on
Mega show.
pretty much. All right. Peace.